It's the amazing Rico Brogna podcast with your host, Evan Roberts.
Rico Brogna. Welcome to another brand new edition of Rico Brogna, episode number 426. The shock, if you want to call it shock, of Pete Alonso returning is now off, and it's all about the start of spring training and the start of this baseball season. We have a lot to talk about on this Rico Brogna. A lot of various thoughts from Met fans on the Alonso signing, what should happen next. There are some who hate David Stearns. And also, we are going to do an exercise that will start in a couple of minutes, which is really analyzing Pete Alonso's 2024. During the All-Star break, I think we did it during the All-Star break this past season. Obviously, one of the big critiques of Pete, I had it too, was that he was not having a clutch season. You know, that most of his numbers were empty. And there's no exact science in determining if that's true or not. I mean, you could look at two outs, runners in scoring position stats. You could look at late and close stats. You could look at any number you want. They can always be a little misleading. So we brought together an exercise that we will continue today that I admit has its own flaws as well. But we looked at every home run Pete Alonso hit in the first half of the regular season last year and basically graded it. We set up the situation, what the score was, how many guys were on base, what the inning was. And Hoff and I decided, was that a clutch home run? Was that a who gives a crap home run? Was that somewhere in the middle to kind of determine? Because Pete's a power hitter. It's all about the home runs, right? Now, that's one factor. Obviously, you can come through with a big two-out double in the ninth inning to win a game. I understand that. But he's paid to hit home runs. So we analyzed all of his home runs from the first half of last season. What we will do in a little bit is we'll take a look at the second half. We'll remind you of his first half home runs. We'll look at the second half. We'll obviously look at his postseason home runs and really try to determine, did Pete Alonso have this insanely unclutched season the way it's described? So we'll do that coming up in a few minutes. But I want to start off with a few of your emails, which kind of made me chuckle, made me laugh a little bit. So the Mets re-signed Pete Alonso. We're very excited. I think most Met fans, at least, are very excited. It is a 2-year contract. Year one, he's making $30 million. Then, of course, there's that opt-out in year two. So what is the reaction from some Met fans? Well, Justin represents a good amount of them because Justin writes immediately, Evan, now that Pete is here, I think it's time to cash in the prospects for pitching. And he talks about trading Brett Beatty or Ronnie Mauricio, Luis Angel Acuna or Jet Williams or Drew Gilbert or Ryan Clifford for either Dylan Cease or Luis Castillo. Is it enough? Is it too much? If Gilbert can play center field long-term, he's useless for us. Well, I would disagree with that. If he can play center field for us, he's useful for us for a long time. Ryan Clifford is not going to be the future first baseman. It's either year to year with Pete, sign Vlad, or eventually moving Vientos to first base. Prospects are sometimes about value than play on the field. Years ago, we could have gotten Gary Sheffield for Jay Payton, Lastings Millage for Manny Ramirez. Prospect hugging is not all that it's cracked up to be. So let me respond with this. Number one, I think Drew Gilbert's got a lot of value on this team moving forward. Right now, when you look at the Mets in 25 and then the Mets beyond, you have Juan Soto, who, yes, is locked in for the next 15 years. But I've already brought this up, and I think a few Met fans have. Do we know if right field is his position for the next half a decade before he moves to DH? Is it not possible that Juan Soto could be a first baseman in 2 or 3 years? It's possible. Now, I don't think the Mets are certainly thinking about that right now. You mentioned the free agents next year, guys like Vladimir Guerrero Jr., even Murakami is an option, moving Vientos to first base. I get all that, but the Mets are going to need outfielders. Brandon Nimmo's also only getting older. I think eventually he's going to DH a little bit more and certainly not be an option in center field. Jose Siri and Tyrone Taylor are nice, useful players. They are not long-term options. So Drew Gilbert being the everyday center fielder later this year or next year is certainly an option. Jet Williams, I don't know where he's going to end up. Like, Jet Williams could be the future second baseman for this team. He also could be an option in center field. So I don't think I would look at any of these prospects as being useless. And I completely disagree about Ryan Clifford. Like, I think that we assume because Steve Cohen's got a lot of money and he has spent a lot of money that next year, the first baseman for the Mets is either going to be Alonso, it's going to be Vlad, or maybe it is that Kyle Tucker idea I have where you sign Tucker and you move either him or Soto to first base. But it's also very possible if Ryan Clifford has a big year at AA, big year at AAA, and blossoms, that David Stearns is going to say, he's the guy. Why should we drop $35 million a year on a player when Ryan Clifford can be the internal option? As far as trading prospects for pitching, Dylan Cease is less appealing to me than Luis Castillo. Now, Luis Castillo is older, but he's also going to be here for 3 years. What I hesitate, and it's not that I'm a prospect hugger, though I've been accused of it, is that I don't really love trading big-time prospects for a pitcher that's clearly a rental. To me, that's not something that I think is in the best interest of this team. How about this email? This guy says, fellas, now that Pete's back, let's go full 2009 Yankees. Let's trade Gilbert, Beatty, and Jonah Tong for Dylan Cease, Jeff McNeil and Ronnie Mauricio to Seattle for Andres Munoz, and let's throw a short-term high AAV money deal at Alex Bregman to play second base. And then he shows me the lineup that would feature Alex Bregman in it. That team can compete with the Dodgers, especially once Acuna and Jet are in center field. Well, let's take them side by side. I don't think the Mariners, even though we have made a deal with them in the past for a closer, see Edwin Diaz, I don't think they have an appetite to trade Andres Munoz, especially if the return is going to be Jeff McNeil, whose value is not that high right now, and Ronnie Mauricio, who's a fine prospect, but he's coming off a torn ACL. So let's throw that trade out there. That one's dead upon arrival. Number 2, you mentioned the Dylan Cease trade. That's a lot for Dylan Cease. That may be able to get it done. That may actually be the package along the lines of what San Diego ends up getting. You get a top 100 prospect in Drew Gilbert. You get a guy you can insert immediately in Brett Beatty, who's not really a prospect anymore, but still has potential. And then a young arm like Jonah Tong. Like, that's actually a very fair offer. I don't think I'd make it. And it's for the reasons I gave. I don't have an appetite for giving up that much for what's a rental, because that's really what it is. They're not going to re-sign him. And as far as Alex Bregman's concerned, we got to throw that one away. Couple of things. Number one, Bregman, who's that last elite level free agent standing, has not shown any interest in taking a short-term high AAV deal. Number 2, the Mets are already in the luxury tax. And I think that there's a line. You know, we wondered a week or two ago, were they even going to cross that line for Pete Alonso? Now, luckily, Steve Cohen did, and Pete's back, and the Mets ended up pulling off the offseason that most of us dreamt about in terms of lineup construction. But they are not then going to throw, let's say, $35 million a year at Alex Bregman. So it's a nice fantasy, but it's not happening. And those are the emails that made me laugh. Because honestly, after they signed Pete off, I said to myself, we're done. This was a hell of an offseason. I get the questions about the rotation, but I think that's it. I think this is the offseason. I think it was a damn good offseason. Let's go right to spring training. Let's break down roster construction. Let's go. And instead, we have a few Met fans saying, all right, we got Pete. What's next? I can't hear you, Hoff. You may be on mute. There you go.
There we go.
There you go.
You know, listen, I'm working out the kinks. I shaved my head. I'm sure I don't know what I'm doing now. No, listen, when you get to this point, though, it's like, why not go one more step? Why not go one more step? And I understand, like, there's a line for everything. But when you bring Pete in and you're like, oh, my God, the offense is pretty much complete. Obviously, some people might want to disagree with the DH. Maybe you want a true DH, whatever the case is. But the pitching staff, if you go one more piece, maybe you're that much closer to knocking off the Dodgers, you know?
I love having the wiggle room to change this roster ever so slightly right around the trade deadline. So what I mean by that is we go into the season. I am good with Jesse Winker at DH. I'm good with Starling Marte at DH. I'm good with McNeil at first at second base with the possibility that the youth can take that job. Same thing in center field. When we get to mid-July, assuming this isn't a disastrous season, right? Assuming they're in it, that can all be reevaluated. We may be sitting here saying, boy, they really need to add a DH. But I don't think you need to make every single move before the season starts. I think good teams are capable of going into a regular season saying, all right, we're going to give these guys the opportunity to fill that role. And if we're wrong, we'll make a trade at the deadline. I think the starting pitching is very similar. Like, we're talking about arms that are not really, really available. We think they're available in Dylan Cease, Michael King, and Luis Castillo. But the reality is they haven't been traded. And I don't think there's any starting pitcher on the free agent market you want to sign. So I am willing to go into this season and say, all right, Let's see if Senga's healthy. Let's see if David Peterson builds off the second half. Let's see if the pitching lab figured out Frankie Montas and Griffin Canning. If the answers are no, then yeah, the Mets may be super aggressive at the trade deadline in adding another arm. Plus, let's not forget Brandon Sproat, who showed up at spring training and everybody's all over themselves watching his bullpens. Like, I am willing as a Met fan to say, let's go. Let's see the season start. And sure, come mid-July, we may be having a very different discussion in terms of what they need to add.
And one thing I will say is, I do think that Stearns is not going to sit there and force the Mets fans to watch Griffin Canning for 3 months if his ERA is a 7.
I agree. We saw that last year. Look at Adrian Hauser. He didn't last that very long in the Met rotation.
So I do feel confident that if some of these experiments do not work, they have other, areas where they're going to go to and dive into. One question I do have for you, you mentioned McNeil, you mentioned it's a place where second base is a place where a lot of these young kids are going to see more time. Who do you think, if you had to take a bet on who's going to see the most time, maybe this is an over and under for us later on before the season starts, who's going to see the most time at second base? Is it Jeff McNeil? Is it Ronnie Mauricio? Or is it Acuna?
I think McNeil only because he's going to get that first crack. He had a good second half last year. I think we forget about that because then he ended up getting hurt. And while I don't think Jeff McNeil is going to win the batting title, I think McNeil's going to have a better season than he had last year and the year before that. And I think a part of the reason I believe that is this is just a better lineup. Jeff McNeil's going to be batting 8th. Pretty much, or 7th, depending on how you want to construct the lineup. And speaking of lineups, I know that's a very big discussion. We will get to that on the next edition of the Rico Brogna. I've been so excited to do this. I've been thinking about it, hoping they would re-sign Pete Alonso so we could have all these arguments about the Met lineup. The next edition of the Rico, we'll get your opinions on it. We'll break it down. We'll argue about it. But I do think that McNeil batting 7th or 8th and the pressure being completely off is going to help. And look, I'll say this about McNeil. As much as I'm excited about Acuna and Jet Williams, I have no issue with Jeff McNeil getting the first crack at second base. If he's hitting 210 on May 5th, then he could be benched. I don't think the Mets are going to care about his salary. I don't think Mendy is going to say, wow, it's Jeff McNeil, I can't sit him. I think he'll sit him. Look, I think that's certainly a possibility, but if I had to guess right now, and that's another Rico we have coming up, we'll make all the predictions for the 2025 season, I think McNeil will play more second base. Now, if you guys remember, right around the All-Star break, Hoff and I sat here, and we graded every Pete Alonso home run. Clutch, middle of the road, or, excuse my French, shit. Okay? Those were the ratings for the Pete Alonso home runs, and we started it right from the beginning of the season, and we ran it all the way until July 14th, which was right before the All-Star break. And our final determination on the 19 home runs that Pete Alonso hit in the first half of the season was, shockingly, 10 of them were considered clutch, 5 of them were middle of the row, and 4 of them were the dog crap, whatever, home runs. Now, here's what's funny about this exercise. It's up to all of us to determine if that's a good percentage or not. Is that good? Is 10 of 19 being clutch a high percentage, or do we look at that and say, that's crap? That's not any good. But that was and I thought we were very fair about it. And I'll go over it very, very quickly for those that missed that edition of the Rico Brogna. I thought we were very fair. So, like, for example, when Pete Alonso hit a solo home run down 7-5 with 1 out in the 9th inning, we called that middle. Now, you could argue that's clutch. I mean, it's the 9th inning. You're basically down to your final few outs. But we decided that's a middle home run, down 7-5, 9th inning, 1 out. A game-tying home run in the 9th inning against the Tigers. Remember that one? That was one of the home runs that early in the season helped turn it around. They were being no-hit. That was the rock-bottom game. That's obviously a clutch home run. Then there was a home run he hit in April against the Royals up 5-1, in which it was a solo home run in the 8th inning to make it 6-1. We define that as shit. Okay? So that's how we did it. We went straight down the line on the clutch, middle of the road, and crap. But we never did the second half of the season. So real quick, let me summarize that first half, and then we'll all analyze together Pete Alonso's home runs in the second half of the year. A game-tying home run in the 4th inning against the Royals. We called that clutch. I know it's the 4th inning, but it's a game-tying home run. Down 11-4, a solo home run to make it 11-5 in the 6th. Yeah, we called that one crap. Down 4-0, Solo home run in the 5th to make it 4-1. We called that crap, but I disagree with it. I would say that was more middle of the road. Down 6-2, a 2-run home run in the 5th inning to make it 6-4. We called that middle of the road. Up 6-4, solo home run in the 9th to make it 7-4. We call that clutch. Solo home run in the 1st inning to go up 1-0. That's always a tricky one because it's so early in the game, but you're setting the tone for the game. We called that clutch. Solo home run in the 1st inning to go up 1-0. Again, he did that. Called it clutch. Solo home run in the 6th inning to go up 6-2. We call that middle of the road. A 2-run home run down 10-3 in the 9th inning. Yeah, we called that one crap. No question about it. Solo home run in the 9th to go up 6-2. We called that clutch. A 3-run home run in the 1st inning to go up 4-1. We called that clutch. Second home run, 2-run home run in the 6th inning to go up 3-1. So tie game in the 6th inning. Obviously, that one is clutch. A solo home run in the 6th inning to go ahead up 3-2, clutch. A 2-run home run in the 10th inning to go up 7-2. This is when they had already taken the lead in the 10th inning. I think this was the game I was at in Washington, D.C. We called that middle of the road. And finally, a game-tying home run against the Rockies in the 4th inning. We called that clutch. All right?
Question. Are we just doing regular season home runs, or we're going to go extend in the playoffs?
Well, we have to include the playoffs, huh?
Oh, okay.
We're going to leave that out?
Just wanted to just was double checking.
All right, so let's start second half of the season, July 24th against the New York Yankees. Now, this is a game the Mets would win 12-3, but he had a 2-run home run in the 4th inning off of Garrett Cole with the Mets trailing 2-1. What would you call that? Clutch?
That's a clutch home run.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, you
off
think
of Garrett Cole. Where were they? In Yankee Stadium or at Citi Field?
In Yankee Stadium.
Clutch.
Turned out to be a game, obviously, the Mets blew them out in, but nevertheless, 4th inning down 2-1 against Garrett Cole. I would say that's a clutch home run. All right, how about this one? Down 9-0. A 2-run home run late in the game to make it 9-2. They would end up losing 10-3. What would you call that one?
Yeah, that's a crap one.
That's a crap one. All right.
See, we're fair. We're fair here on the Rico. We really are.
We're very fair. There are many people that think we are Pete Alonso apologists. We're calling it like it is. All right, that's all we're doing. I like this exercise, by the way. We should do this with every player throughout the season.
We should go through Ray Ordonez's career.
Oh, could you imagine?
All 10 of them.
July 29th against the Minnesota Twins. The Mets are down 1-0, and Pete Alonso hits a home run in the 4th inning to tie the game at 1. The Mets would go on and win the game 15-2.
I mean, that's a clutch home run.
I agree.
The final score doesn't mean what it. The final score isn't telling of what the moment was. Let's put it that way.
Completely agree with you because it's a close game in the 4th inning, and I understand that the 9th inning is certainly a higher leverage than the 4th inning, but you only get 4 at bats, right? For the most part, you get 4 at bats in a baseball game. So you don't get a lot of opportunities. This isn't the NBA where the ball's going to be in your hands the entire 4th quarter if need be. So when you hit a home run in the 4th inning to tie the game, I have a tough time saying that's irrelevant. I mean, so I agree with you. That's clutch. Let's go to August 2nd in Anaheim against the Angels. The game is tied 1-1, and he hits a 2-run home run in the 3rd inning to give the Mets the lead. To go up 3-1, they'd win the game 5-1.
I think that's clutch.
Again, of course it is.
Same price, same thing, yeah.
Same thing. It's basically the game-winning home run. This one's a little trickier. The Mets are already up 2-0 in Colorado against the Rockies. Pete hits a 2-run home run in the 1st inning to make it 4-0. So he takes it from 2-0 to 4-0, and we're still in the 1st inning.
I still think that's a clutch home run.
I disagree. I'd say middle. I'd say that's, kind of in the middle.
I mean, it's the 1st inning. You're setting the tone. I know you're up 2-0, but you basically put the game out of hand by the time. What was the final score?
Final score of that game was 9-1.
Game was over after that home run.
Well, we disagree. I'll go middle of the road. All right, okay. Middle/clutch.
It ain't crap.
All right, that same day, by the way, he hit another home run. I forgot about this. So now they're up 4-0, and he hits a solo home run in the 3rd inning to make it 5-0. Again, they win the game 9-1.
All right, that's a crap one.
See, I would just say middle again. Like, it's still only the 3rd inning. You're telling me at Coors Field the game's over? Like it's a crap home run? I can't say that.
I guess, but partly you get crap because it is Coors Field.
Yeah, but because it's Coors Field, the Rockies are capable of coming back. You don't know the game's out of reach at that moment. All right, a week later, at home against the A's, the Mets are up 2-0, and he hits a solo home run in the 4th inning.
Again, if this score was like 4-0, I'd say it's middle of the road. Because it's so close, I'm going to say crap. I'm going to say clutch.
I'm going to go with middle. I think
Really?
we're getting too aggressive in using the word clutch. It's not unclutch. I'm not saying it like it's dog crap, but I'd say it's more middle. You're also noticing a lot of solo home runs now, which I know pisses some people off. August 17th at home against the Marlins, the Mets are up 1-0, and he hits a solo home run in the 2nd inning to make it 2-0. Mets win the game 4-0.
I mean, this is like a test that I'd fail left and right.
Well, there's no right answer to it. That's the problem.
I feel it's the opening scene to Ghostbusters when it's like he's holding up a triangle and he goes squiggly lines and he gets the buzzer. I'm gonna say it's a 1-0 game. I'm gonna go clutch.
Yeah. I'm trying to define the difference between middle and clutch because I agree with you. If you take the lead in the 1st inning, like you're setting the tone for the game, but you're also still sort of doing it here because it's only a 1-0 game. So I'll give you a clutch. Maybe you're right.
All right.
By the way, a lot of these home runs are really similar. Wait for this. August 27th against the Diamondbacks, 0-0, solo home run, top of the 2nd inning. Mets go up 1-0. They go on to win the game 8-3.
And they're winning all these games, by the way.
Yes. So based on that, it's got to be clutch, right?
Yeah.
2 days later, 0-0, solo home run to start the 2nd inning. Exact same situation. Mets would win that game 3-2. In fact, that was the game that I would argue is the game of the year because that was the win that they had the day after Edwin Diaz gave up the grand slam to Corbin Carroll.
Oh, yeah.
So I thought that was one of their biggest wins of the year, and he is the one who set the tone by hitting the home run in the 2nd inning.
Clutch.
All right. 2 days later in Chicago against the White Sox, 0-0. 2-run home run in the 1st inning to give them a 2-0 lead. They go on, they win 5-3.
And even though it's the White Sox, it's a tone setter.
Yeah.
So it's a clutch.
I agree with you. I know a lot of these home runs are early, and that may tick off a lot of the Alonso haters, but they all count the same. I mean, scoring runs in the 1st inning versus scoring runs in the 7th inning, like the runs all count the same. All right, let's go to September 3rd. I think this one's a little bit more complicated. The Mets are up 5-2 in the 8th inning. Okay, bottom of the 8th inning, they're up 5-2, and he hits a 2-run home run to make it 7-2. Mets win the game 7-2.
I think the game was probably already out of hand by then. It's not crap, but it's definitely middle of the road.
It's definitely middle of the road. I agree. Like, it's still a safe situation at 5-2. You know, when we're watching that game, that was a game at Citi Field, and we're all sitting there, and it's 5-2, and I forget if there were 2 outs or not. We're all sitting there saying, come on, break this game open. Like, we can't worry or sweat out a 3-run lead in the 9th inning, and obviously that 2-run home run makes it a 5-run game. The one I'm about to give you is the ultimate in crap home runs. This is king of crap. The Mets are up 10-0, and Pete hits a solo home run off position player Cody Clemens.
I mean, because it's Clemens, maybe give it's a crap home run.
All right. A couple of days later against the Nationals, the Mets are up 6-1, and he hits a 3-run home run in the 6th inning to make it 9-1.
Yeah, I could say that's a crap one too.
Yeah, I'd lean towards crap. Against the Phillies, up 1-0, solo home run in the 1st inning to make it 2-0.
Again, I think that's clutch.
He's got a lot of those. I mean, that is the one thing I certainly learned by doing this exercise. While they're important home runs, okay, I'd argue with anyone who says they're crap, despite it being early in the game. You notice the trend that he was not hitting a lot of late game home runs. There's a few in there, but most of these are 1st, 2nd inning home runs, which there's nothing wrong with because you want to take an early lead. But I think that added to the belief that he didn't have a clutch here because you don't have that many Lindor moments late where he's saving them. You've got a few. Remember that early one against the Tigers we talked about, but there's no doubt a lot of these quote-unquote clutch home runs are happening in the first few innings of a game.
And now this game against the Phillies, they won by how much?
They ended up winning the game 10-6.
10-6. I mean, so did it have to do with the final tally? Maybe not, but still, it gave them a little cushion.
So based on our calculations, he had 15 second-half home runs, and we've got 7 of them being clutch home runs, 2 of them being crap home runs, 4 of them being middle of the road. Now we get to the postseason. This is the fun part, right? Well, I guess we'll start with the obvious one. It's game 3 of the wild card series. The Mets are down to their final 2 outs, and Pete Alonso hits a game-leading, game-winning, series-winning 3-run home run in the 9th inning against Devin Williams. We need a new name for it. It isn't clutch. What is it, like balls of stone?
Yeah, it's like the what do they call it at the end of Mortal Kombat? Finish him. It's a finish him move.
Yeah. That's as good as it gets. That's home run number 1. Home run number 2. I was at this one. This is game 2 of the division series in Philadelphia. The Mets have a 2-0 lead in the 6th inning. Pete hits a solo home run to make it 3-0. The next inning is when they blow the lead. Then they take the lead back. Then they blow it again. Then they tie the game. And then the Phillies walk it off. It turned out to be this classic in game 2. But Pete did hit a home run at Citizens Bank Park that gave them a 3-0 lead in the 6th inning. Sort of forgettable because they blew the lead and then so many different things happened. Where would you put that home run?
Because of the situation, I would still lean towards clutch. You know, again, you're sitting there, you're visiting ballpark, playoffs, you're the underdog team. You have to say that's a clutch home run.
I think my bar is a lot lower in the playoffs. If you hit a home run in the postseason, in a postseason game, more times than not, they're clutch. You know, unless it's 8-1 in the 9th inning. Like, it's important, especially that environment. You know, in Philadelphia, a very, very tough crowd. You know, it was a silencer, man, when Pete went deep. Home run number 3 was actually 2 days later, was game 3 of the NLDS. It is a solo home run in a scoreless game in the 2nd inning against Aaron Nola. Very indicative of the other Pete home runs throughout the season. Let's take an early lead. But he did give them an early lead. And remember, that's his first home playoff at-bat in the postseason. It's the welcome back after he hit the home run against Milwaukee. Mets have been on the road for what seems like forever. Now, last time the Mets were home before that game, they were playing that Sunday night game against the Philadelphia Phillies. So that home run off Nola reminded me of David's home run in the World Series against Kansas City. Obviously not quite the same stage, but it did set the tone. Mets go on and win 7-2. How do you define that one?
Yeah, that's it's not finish him, it's fatality. Now, that's not a fatality. It's not the game's over, but that's definitely a clutch home run for sure. Set
the tone, especially of a tough cookie like Aaron Nola. You know,
yeah.
You did it off a good pitcher. And then finally, his 4th postseason home run would occur in game 5 against the Dodgers, a 3-run home run in the 1st inning off of Jack Flaherty that put the Mets up 3-0. They would go on and win 12-6. Let's not forget, David Peterson somehow, some way escaped the top of the 1st inning. And that's the thing I remember most about game 5, where the Mets extended their season, was how they escaped the 1st inning. How David Peterson was a magician. I know he ended up not pitching well in that game, and it was a high-scoring affair. Luckily, the Mets were able to score enough runs, and they won the game. But I remember Peterson escaping and then Alonso giving you that deep breath as he takes Flaherty deep to give them a 3-0 lead. Clutch.
Oh, no doubt about it. No doubt about it. I mean, listen, he hit 4 home runs in the playoffs. They were all clutch.
I think what this exercise has taught us is, A, we have a lot of time on our hands, but B, a lot of Pete's home runs last year, including the postseason, just happened early in games. And I think that really led to the perception that he was unclutch. Because in our minds, clutch is late in the game. Clutch is 9th inning down a run, did you come through? That's clutch. And I get it. I'm not dismissing that. It is incredibly frustrating as a fan when you're sitting there and you got a million opportunities late in the game, and Pete Alonso, who's paid money to drive runs in, doesn't drive them in. That's why I agree with the majority of thought that he didn't have the greatest clutch season. But I think that sometimes we forget that you can have a big hit, a tone-setting hit, early in a game. Now, I'd love to see Pete Alonso hit a hell of a lot more of these in the 7th, 8th, and 9th inning next year, and I think he will. I think he can, because this is just 2024. It's not like we've gone through every home run in Pete Alonso's career. Boy, that's a good idea. You want to do that one? I'm just kidding.
We have a lot of time on our hands. The spring training starts in how many weeks? What?
Well, a couple of days, baby. A couple of days we got spring training.
Let me ask you a question, though. Do you think if we did this little exercise but we did it with his at-bats in the 7th, 8th, and 9th inning, that we'd get a much more disappointing
Yes.
record, I guess, of at-bats.
Yeah, because I'm not like, we didn't do this exercise to prove a thesis. Like, if you ask me, did Pete Alonso have a clutch 2024, obviously before the postseason? My answer is no. Like, obviously, I agree with that sentiment. Watching the Mets every day, you didn't have that confidence when Pete came up late in the game with guys on base. So this was not done to say, see, you're wrong. No, I didn't think he had a clutch here either. It's more like an experiment. Like, all right, he's a home run hitter. He had 34 home runs. Let's go through them. Like, were they clutch? Were they not clutch? Let's just go through it. And I think what we learned is most of these home runs were early in games. And if this upcoming season that changes and his late and close numbers are better, and he is getting big hits in the 7th or 8th inning, the perception of Pete will be different. But at least we get another opportunity to see it. Because for a while, there was so many moments throughout this postseason where I thought it was just going to end like this. And now we do get Pete Alonso back for another full season, and we get him in what is an absolutely loaded lineup. And I think that's what's so exciting about it. And speaking of the loaded lineup, I want to get to an email that was very, very interesting. So let's analyze it, okay? Concerning this Met team, their roster, and how you would compare it to teams of past. All right, here we go. Let me find it because I think I lost it. Oh, by the way, before I read that, Josh Sachs writes, hey, I'm just curious, what are you covering up with the Mets towel over your right shoulder? This is for the YouTube audience. If you listen via podcast, obviously we're all audio, but the visual when you watch us on YouTube is me looking very ugly with some pictures behind me. I got a picture of Rico Brogna. I got an Edwin Diaz bobblehead. I got a Brandon Nimmo bobblehead. I got my book, My Mets Bible. I got some Mets stuff, and I got this blue towel. So for the visual audience, I'm going to pull this towel off since Josh is asking me, what is it covering? Because the truthful answer is it ain't covering anything. I have a Let's Go Mets towel, and I just figured I'd put it up. So here's the great reveal. I'm going to take the towel off. 1, 2, 3. Say it's not covering anything. It's just a Let's Go Mets towel. I think that's Josh's way of saying it's ugly. Please take it down. But thank you very much for the email, Josh. All right, let me get to this comparison email from Mark Ray. Mark writes, hey, guys, now that Pete Alonso's finally back, I think it's accurate to say that the 2025 Mets are the most talented offense on paper, at least, in Mets history. Ron Darling said on SNY that this is the golden age of Mets baseball, and I agree. I think the only comparable team would be the 86 roster. So how about you compare the 86 and 2025 rosters position by position and how they stack up? I can't wait to hear the roaring ovations for Soto, Lindor, and Alonso during the home opener. It's going to be epic. Dumb question, by the way, speaking of rousing ovations. If Juan Soto goes 0 for 11 in Houston, and then let's say 0 for 11 in Miami, and he makes his Citi Field Mets debut in an 0 for 22 slump, does Juan Soto not get the rousing ovation that you're describing? That's just a question. Like, I'm not a booer, so I'm not booing him. I'm excited he's a Met. I wouldn't be worried off a slow start. But, Hoff, in your opinion, if Soto begins his Met career by going 0 for 22, what's his ovation on opening day at Citi Field?
I still think he's going to get applause. I think you have to. I know it's not a great start, but you got to remember, if this is going to be 15 years of this, it's the same thing with the Lindor approach, too. You have to have a little patience. I'm not sitting here saying if he goes the first year and bats 200, that we're going to sit here and not be a little nervous. But the first 22 games of the season, you got to give the guy a little bit of a rest.
I hope so.
Not a rest.
We are a tough fan base. You know, you mentioned Lindor, Carlos Beltran heard boos. Like, we boo people no matter how hyped up they are when they come here. Number one, I think Soto may be different because look what he did last year with the Yankees. That's a more pressurized spot in a way. I mean, I know he's trying to play up to the contract here with the Mets, but in the Yankee case, he's playing for a contract last year. You know, you're playing for the, hey, I want the $755 million. So you could argue that Soto actually faced more pressure last year with the Yankees than even this year with the Mets. So I kind of lean towards the Met fans will be a little bit more patient, but we have booed Mike Piazza. We have booed Carlos Beltran. we've basically booed every single star that came here with huge expectations.
I will tell you this much. I was one of the people that booed Piazza, but it was never for his offensive skill. It was because of his defensive issues. I watched a rundown with Mike Piazza, and I forgot who his battery was, if he was going back to third base, but it was just so sloppy. He threw the ball away, and I just was very frustrated by the fact that he was not a great defensive catcher.
I get you. I mean, I probably yelled at you if I saw you at the game, but I get you. As far as the question about comparing them to 1986, you can't. I mean, I'll do it anyway. It's a fair question, but the pitching is the difference. Like, what made the 1986 Mets incredible was they were great at everything. They had a great offense, but they also had a great rotation. Their team ERA in 1986 was number 1. They scored more runs than any other team in the National League. So it wasn't just lineup to lineup. It was the pitching. And that's where the Mets this year fall very short to the 86 team. I mean, you're talking about a rotation that was loaded. Think about Doc Gooden and Ron Darling. I mean, Bob Ojeda had a great year that year. That's a tough one. So that's where the Mets fall short. But in terms of the offense, all right, let's go position by position. Gary Carter versus Francisco Alvarez. I will tell you, even though Carter clearly has the edge, Gary Carter at 24 home runs in 1986. Will Francisco Alvarez hit more than 24 home runs in 2025? I think the hope and the expectation is yes, especially if Alvarez can stay healthy. First base is Keith Hernandez. I love Pete. Pete will beat him in one stat, which is home runs. Keith will take him in everything else. Higher batting average, higher on base, and obviously one of the great defensive first basemen of all time. Second base is Wally Backman. Compare him to Jeff McNeil. I mean, it really depends what kind of year Jeff McNeil has. If Jeff McNeil bounces back and wins a batting title, then sure, you could put him right up there. You know, Wally Backman at 320 in 1986. Is Jeff McNeil hitting 320? Probably not. So I kind of give the 86 Mets the edge. So right now it's 3-0 86 Mets, to be fair. Shortstop, there you go. There's your first complete mismatch. The immortal Rafael Santana versus MVP candidate Francisco Lindor. Huge edge for the current Mets. I'd even say the same thing at third base. Ray Knight had a really good year in 1986, turned out to be the World Series MVP. But Mark Vientos, if he can just match what he did last year once he became the everyday third baseman, that would be another edge for the 2025 New York Mets. Right field is Darryl Strawberry versus Juan Soto. How about that matchup? That is a premier matchup. And I'll play the game this way. I'm going to give you Darryl's numbers from 1986, and you tell me how you'd feel if this is Juan Soto's numbers in 2025. Okay? Batting average, 259. We would not be thrilled. On base percentage, 358. We would not be thrilled. 27 home runs. Yeah, I mean, Soto, I expect him to hit more than 30 home runs, but I don't think home runs are the real important stat when it comes to Juan Soto. 93 RBIs, yeah, especially if he's batting second, seems just about right. An OPS of 865. If those are Juan Soto's numbers, we would be disappointed. And I think that's how you know, as much as we love Darryl Strawberry, and he's got his number retired now at Citi Field, I would give Juan Soto the edge. Center field, we're talking about Lenny Dykstra versus the combo of Tyrone Taylor and Jose Siri. We'll give Lenny the edge. And then left field, there was a lot of George Foster. Mookie Wilson was out there. I give Brandon Nimmo the edge. So how did we count this? Nimmo, Soto, Vientos, and Lindor. We do not have a DH. That makes it 4-4. That makes it a pretty even matchup between the offense of the 1986 Mets and the offense of the 2025 Mets. But obviously the huge difference is the pitching. That's where the 86 Mets have a monstrous edge.
That's what I was going to say. I was like, now let's do the pitching and go, let's just do the bullpen. How about that? Even though that's actually not true, because the Mets bullpen is actually probably the one thing that's much better than the 86 bullpen.
I think the Met bullpen, look, bullpens are so fickle. They really are. And we're going to have a podcast coming up next week where we're going to compare last year's Mets to this year's Mets, what these guys have to do to match and surpass last year, because they won 89 games last year. How do the Mets get there? And the most difficult thing we're going to do on that podcast is compare bullpens, because bullpens from year to year, you don't know. Look at Edwin Diaz. Last year, Edwin Diaz lost his closer's role. 2 years ago, he's the greatest closer in the history of baseball. Start right there. What you get from Edwin Diaz is you just don't know. Health, guys like Reed Garrett coming out of nowhere. So I think bullpens are always the most difficult thing to predict. But I wouldn't compare this team to the 86 team. I think the comparison is 2006, where the Mets' strength was going to be their offense. Now, they had big names in their rotation because they did have Pedro Martinez. They did have Tommy Glavine. They did have El Duque. All three of those guys were well past their prime. And remember, two of them were non-factors in the playoffs because they got hurt. But the Mets in 06 turned out to be a team built on a big-time offense and what turned out to be a really deep bullpen. So I think if we're comparing this team to any other Met team in franchise history and trying to find what they remind you of, to me, would be the 2016.
So you're saying we're getting back to the NLCS?
I am not saying that at all.
Okay. I hope that's what you're saying.
I mean, I hope so too. I just don't want to be losing on a Juan Soto-looking strike three.
Hey, listen, it will never be as bad as the downward spiral from 07 and 08. It's never going to be that bad because I trust that Steve Cohen and David Stearns will continuously fix this to make this a constant winner, constant playoff winner. And no matter how much we fought about the Pete Alonso situation this offseason, in the end, they did the right thing.
Speaking of which, it's the fans' turn. Now that Steve Cohen and David Stearns basically did everything we wanted, it's on us to show up. Cohen has shown his willingness to spend even when working at an extreme loss because we haven't shown up consistently enough. Imagine how much he would spend if we packed out Citi Field every night and he turned a profit. That email is a spot-on email. He's right about that. Now, I can't lecture anybody to spend their money to go to a baseball game. Going to baseball games are incredibly expensive. So it's up to the individual on if they can, if they're willing to. But I think in general, that is a spot-on email in terms of Steve Cohen is very different than Hal Steinbrenner, very different than the Dodger Guggenheim Group. They are incredibly profitable franchises. So when they spend a lot of money, they're doing it partially because they make a lot of money. The Mets don't make a lot of money. Their TV deal is not the Yes Network deal. They don't draw like the New York Yankees. They're not the Yankees. And so when the Mets have a high payroll, it's because Steve Cohen has a willingness to spend, which is appreciated. I think he's right. If the Met fan doesn't show up and the attendance is lousy, I could see Cohen saying, why am I doing this? I'm doing this to get you guys to show up. You got to spend money to make money, which I agree with. So I do think that email's right, that there is now a little bit of pressure on us to show up at Citi Field and pack that building, because last year was bad until the very end. Last homestand of the year, they did very well, specifically the last series of the year against the Phillies. But outside of that, the attendance was abysmal at Citi Field, and I think it needs to be better this year, not just because it's a better environment, it's fun, but I think he's right. Like Steve Cohen could say, why am I spending my money if you guys aren't going to return the favor?
See, here's the thing, though, is we've talked about this and discussed this for a long time, how Citi Field is just not going to get as packed as some other stadiums on the constant basis because just of this, the location, what's around it. And this is why Steve Cohen is also building things around there, too, just building more attractions. I think that part of the reason why it's going to take a little bit longer to see packed houses on a constant basis is because it's going to take a little bit longer to build around it. Once you see those, whether it's a casino, whether it's a hotel, whether it's a mall, whatever's being built around there, that's going to add to the, hey, let's go to a game. It's more of an attraction.
I get your point, but the reason I disagree with you is that the Mets have drawn well before, and they've never had anything around Citi Field and before that Shea Stadium. They have had 3 million people years where they've drawn 3 million people. Their attendance was significantly down last year. There is a capability to have big crowds at Citi Field. It's not all that. I agree that, yes, it's better. Yes, it makes the experience better, but they've shown in the past they can draw. And I think they will draw this year. The question is how many? They can average 35,000 people a night? I have no idea. A couple of more of your emails, the ricob@gmail.com. Evan and Pete, my name is Dean. I'd like to know if you've ever seen such an emotional attachment to a Mets player the way the Met fans have with Pete Alonso, who most fans didn't want to see go to another team. Jacob deGrom accomplished much more as a Met, and I don't recall seeing Met fans this emotionally invested in deGrom's free agent offseason. Also, How long do you think the beard would have been by February 5th, 2025, the day Pete's signing was announced? Well, thank you, Dean. I mean, I would have looked like, ZZ Top if I had kept that beard. That would have been a full year and 4 months with a beard if I had truly kept my word, which I didn't, sorry, of keeping that beard till Pete Alonso signed. And think about how empty that feeling would have been. The whole point was for him to get a long-time extension, be a career Met. Obviously, a lot changes over that year and a half. I grow the beard out, and he signs a one-year deal. So, no regrets. The DeGrom question is interesting. Al Cintron, who does a fine job doing overnights and doing a lot of shifts at WFA, and asked me the other day, he said, Evan, could you put a poll up? I said, sure. What's the poll, Al? And he said, I want to poll Met fans on which of these homegrown free agents you wanted back the most. And the three options were Pete Alonso, Jose Reyes, and Jacob DeGrom. And I could have sworn that either it was going to be recency bias to Pete or Jose Reyes. I didn't think DeGrom would win. And DeGrom did win. He got 42% of the vote, and then Pete and Jose were pretty much tied at around 28, 29%. So that email, Dean, it's a great question that you feel that way, at least on X. I don't know what that defines. Met fans are telling you they wanted DeGrom back. Here's what I think the difference is. I think you have to look at all three of those cases. I think in the case of Jose Reyes, the Mets were in this spot in their history where things were just going bad. And so we wanted Jose back. I know I wanted Jose back. I know there was a lot of blowback against Jose Reyes because remember, he did the bunt hit and then took himself out of the game, and he took a lot of heat from Met fans. I admit I was defending him. I was one of the rare guys on FAN that was defending Jose Reyes, saying, look, he did what a lot of other guys would do. He wanted to win the batting title. Wade Boggs did something like that. We got to get over it. But I did hear at the time that Jeff Wilpon was very pissed off. He also didn't want to spend. So I think we were upset, but we were upset at the Wilpons knowing, wow, we're really in this post-Madoff world where they're not spending. But the difference between winning and losing didn't feel that significant because the Mets stunk. Like we were in the middle of this kind of malaise in Met history. The DeGrom thing was, and so far a lot of people are right about this, we love Jake, but we don't think he can stay healthy. How can we re-sign this guy? He's very unreliable. When you look at what happened in 2021, where he missed the entire second half after putting together one of the greatest first halves in the history of baseball. He missed the entire beginning of 2022. And then he wasn't the same guy when he came back. He had that dud of a performance against the A's. He was average against Atlanta during the collapse. And while he won the one playoff game, he wasn't the dominant Jacob DeGrom. So I think with a lot of Met fans, it was a baseball, hey, I just don't think he could stay healthy. And then there were people who just thought he didn't want to come back, which has still never been proven. I think in Pete's case, why there was so much more emotional investment is, A, it dragged out a long time. DeGrom was signed and delivered pretty early during the offseason. And two, he was such an obvious fit. You know, in the case of DeGrom, the arguments we would get against us was you can't trust him to stay healthy. You don't have that argument against Pete. The only argument you have against Pete is, well, he's declining. Okay, his numbers have declined the last 3 years, but he can still hit 30 home runs, driving 90 runs. He is still important to this team. So I think, Dean, to answer your question on why it seemed like there was such an emotional attachment, I don't think it was emotional as much as it was baseball-wise, this felt more important. Baseball-wise, it felt in a year in which the Mets are going to have huge expectations, how can you let him go? This email says, during this whole negotiation process, almost everyone was saying that even if Pete resigns, he still wouldn't be a Met for life. That's something I have said numerous times. Well, Pete will have the best protection of his career with Soto in the lineup. With that protection, let's say Pete has a year with a 255 average, over 40 home runs, and over 120 RBIs. He will obviously opt out. You don't think the Mets will re-sign him? He'll probably be cheaper than Vlad, and you'll probably get Pete on a shorter deal, which Stearns would like. Pete will maybe get 6 to 7 years, while Vlad will probably get 10 plus years. What are your thoughts? I do think there are avenues where Pete Alonso comes back next year. I do. And I think you laid one out where he has a really good year, but not getting 6 to 7 years. there still isn't a robust market for him because now he's 31 years old. And he's still the same unathletic build. He's still the same right-handed, slugging, one-tool first baseman who's only going to decline. So where I disagree with you is even if Pete puts up those numbers, I don't think he's ever getting a 6-year deal. Vladimir Guerrero Jr. will. And you're right. David Stearns could eventually look at Vlad and say, while he's better than Pete and he's younger than Pete, would I rather give, and I'll give you 2 hypothetical contracts, Vladimir Guerrero getting a, let's say, 10-year, $400 million deal. Now, is that crazy, by the way, considering what the Blue Jays and Vlad are probably talking about right now? $40 million a year, a 10-year deal. He's still only 27 years old, 26 years old. Like, 10 years, $400 million is a realistic package for Vladimir Guerrero Jr., am I right?
No, 100%. I think that's actually like what I think the price tag is going to be, no matter what.
So that's Vlad's contract, right? Now, Pete has the year our last emailer describes. I still don't think there's a robust market for him. So let's say the best he could do is 4 years, $120 million. The $30 million a year he earned this year, and now someone's willing to give him a 4-year deal. I want every Met fan to ask themselves this question. Knowing the age, knowing everything, knowing there is going to be an endpoint for Steve Cohen in spending, would you rather have Pete on 4 years, 120, or Vlad on 10 years, 400? Like, and knowing David Stearns, he may not love Alonso the player, but the value and the years would actually point you towards Stearns preferring a reunion with a guy in Pete Alonso who's already proven he can play in New York.
I know the fan base is going to want Vlad. They don't care. That is 100%. I don't care what type of season Pete Alonso has this year. It's, first of all, it's got to be better than Vlad Guerrero's, no matter what. Like batting average, OPS, all that's got to be better. Not just home runs, not just RBIs. You're going to have a season that just totally outdoes Vlad Guerrero Jr. because you're talking about a guy, again, who's so young, who's going to have that length that you're going to get him in a prime, you know?
I get it. I'm just talking about the value of the contract. And David Stearns apparently cares about value of contracts. Like, he's not just throwing money around. And I don't think Guerrero is Juan Soto. Like, I think with Soto, he was so good that you basically said, screw value, just get him, whatever it takes. I think Vladimir Guerrero Jr. is a wonderful player. I don't think he's Juan Soto. I don't think he's the guy you close your eyes and say, all right, screw it, I'll give you whatever you wanted. And I'm just pointing out that our emailer is right in terms of there are avenues where Pete comes back. Am I confident he's a Met for life? No. I think it's clear that there are many ways in which he's not a New York Met next year, but there are ways where he is. You know, Ryan Clifford doesn't develop in the minor leagues because I honestly think that the more realistic avenue to Pete being gone is not Vladimir Guerrero Jr. or Kyle Tucker. I think it's Ryan Clifford tearing it up in the minors and the Mets believing our first baseman's right here. Now, the Mets could easily say, you know what? And this is what I would say, because let's say that's the reason they want to move on from Pete. Clifford's booming. I would probably take the approach of, man, I'd love to get Pete back again on a high AAV short-term deal and have him gradually become the designated hitter where Ryan Clifford gets his opportunity, but there's insurance. Like, let's say Clifford doesn't hit the major league level. Let's say as good as he looked at AAA, it doesn't work. You still have Pete Alonso there almost as an insurance policy, but I think a lot of that's going to depend on what his market is. So I'm not confident he'll be a lifelong Met, but there's certainly avenues to where he can come back. Last email, this is from Tyson. People hate David Stearns. There's a dynamic happening with the Met fan base that I do not think you're aware of. You've expressed incredulously that Met fans would boo David Stearns at Amazing Day and believed that they were booing his words, not him. That is true. That is what I have said. I'm here to tell you that there is a not insignificant number of Met fans who absolutely loathe David Stearns and have created this mythology where they believe Steve Cohen to be the driving force behind their favorite moves, primarily Juan Soto and Pete Alonso, and that Cohen had to strong-arm Stearns in order to get those deals done. They believe that Stearns, quote, wanted to run Pete out of town and was stopped by good old Uncle Stevie. They attributed all blame for Milwaukee's lack of playoff success to David Stearns while giving him none of the credit for reaching the NLCS in year one with us. This is lunacy. If you don't believe me, run a poll on your Twitter account asking if people are satisfied with David Stearns as the president of baseball operations. And then check out the comment section. Beningo ain't alone in his Sternophobia. I would like to encourage you to continue to push back on this idiocy. The Mets finally have an objectively competent front office, someone who is arguably one of the top 3 executives in the whole sport. And these jabronis can't wait for him to be fired. Please do what is in your power to continue to educate these fans and debunk their conspiracy theories. To be clear, I'm not saying Stearns should be immune to criticism. Those criticisms should be rooted in reality. Love the pod. Keep on keeping on. Thank you, Tyson. David Stearns did not want to run Pete Alonso out of town. As much as Hoff may have thought it, as much as Beningo may have thought it, it is not true. David Stearns is a cutthroat team president, which means he probably has a chalkboard in his office in which he assigns value to each player. And his value for Pete Alonso was probably about $23 million. That'd be my guess, maybe $22 million. Where things changed is I think Cohen probably said to David, you know what? It is my money. Obviously, you want the player back because you've got him valued at something. It's not like it says no value, get this doofus off my team. But I am willing, since it's my pocketbook, it's my wallet, to pay the tax and basically pay the Met fans love him tax to get him back, which is where the AAV gets the $27 million, even if David Stearns on his chalkboard says, I value him at 22. That is far different than the idea that David Stearns didn't want him back. I never believed that. It was repeated. It was said over and over again, but it doesn't make it true. That's number one. Number two, the idea that David Stearns is a small market team president, small market general manager. Look at Milwaukee. Look at Milwaukee. He wasn't allowed to spend money in Milwaukee. He was a small market team president because he had to be a small market team president. The Mets have a huge payroll. He's willing to spend. Now, is he trying to be smart because he knows at some point Steve's going to say enough's enough? I'm not paying the tax anymore. Yes. And he has a belief, which I disagree with, and this is where I think it's okay. We can disagree. He has a belief so far where he does not want to give any starting pitcher above the age of 30 a long-term deal. I disagree. I'd make an exception for one guy. I wouldn't want my entire rotation locked up with guys into their mid-30s. See the New York Yankees. Like, I wouldn't want that. But would have I been willing to pick one guy, in this case, Corbin Burns, and say, you know what? Let's go. Let's go get this guy. Yes, and that's a disagreement. But David Stearns has done a fine job for the year and a half he's been here. We will be open to criticizing him when we don't like moves he makes. But the idea that all good moves are Steve and David Stearns is like telling, I know, don't spend money. It's ridiculous. Why is that the case? Like, why do Met fans or some Met fans believe that? I don't know. Maybe it's where he came from. Maybe it's the fact that he was a small market team president. Maybe it's the Wilpon phobia, if you will. We still have that in the back of our mind. But this is a different franchise. David Stearns knows what he's doing, even if we disagree with him at times. Steve Cohen is willing to spend, and the New York Mets just pulled off, in my opinion, as close to a dream offseason as one can have. They brought in Juan Soto. They kept Pete Alonso. The lineup is a dream. The pitching, different story. But this was a dream offseason. And at the end of the day, whether you want to give Steve Cohen credit, David Stearns credit, Pete Alonso credit, my beard credit, who cares? David Stearns is the team president, and Pete Alonso is the first baseman. We appreciate the emails to ricob@gmail.com. One thing we're going to start doing, I like disagreeing with people. Pete and I last week had a good disagreement. It was fun. We were arguing about Pete Alonso. And so we realized we want more disagreement on the Rico Brogna. So when you email the Rico and you disagree with me, we may start emailing you back and saying, hey, on our next Rico, here's a link. We're going to have you pop in for a little 5-minute discussion, if you will. So we're going to start to incorporate that over the next few weeks on the Rico Brogna. Coming up in just a couple of days, we're going to analyze the lineup. My thoughts on the Mets lineup, your thoughts on the Mets lineup. We're going to crunch the numbers. We're going to go through it all. So we have a lot of new live Rico Brognas coming up as we begin spring training this week. Of course, rate, subscribe, download Rico Brogna. And of course, you can email us to ricob@gmail.com. Thank you very much for listening, subscribing, and hanging out with us on episode 426 of Rico Brogna.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Rico Brogna podcast. It's amazing, isn't it? Make sure you download it now to keep it on you at all times.